a cost of delay is a topic that's quite dear to my heart because of the many situations I've been in different organizations where there's problems with priority and there's problems with sequencing and so on of work requests, because never in all my time in working in organizations has there been not enough work for us to do, right? So there's normally a lot of work to do, more than we can do. So if we're trying to improve the way we prioritize, and I prefer the word sequencing because you can have multiple number one priorities, and then which one do you start with first? So sequencing solves that. And yeah, so if we're trying to improve sequencing, improve scheduling of work, make better trade-off decisions when, for example, we know that we've got 5 things that we know that we can do 5 things, but there are 10 things to do, then how do we choose which of those 10 things we should do? So that would be trade-off decisions. And most importantly, actually, I like to change the focus of the conversation, because often what happens is someone comes in and just tells everyone this is the priority, but no one really understands why. So to really change the focus of the conversation from an emotional conversation about priority to a data-driven decision-making process. So a couple of things, because cost of delay was born from product development. Product development has supply and demand, right? So on the supply side, if we look at a simple chart, imagine we're working on a project and we get to a point and someone says, okay, we've got enough, turn off the tap, right? So we stop over here and then we want to start the next thing. So go on the next project. The problem is, there's some kind of maybe a kickstart period where we're trying to understand what the new project is about. Maybe we don't even have the right people in the team to deliver it. And then when we start delivering over time, it takes a little while before we get to a point where we're delivering effectively on this new project. So I guess the point is that you can't just stop delivery and then start it again. It doesn't work like that. So building the supply takes time. There's a ramp-up period. And usually, by the way, this is around 6 months or more before we get into a delivery groove on a new big endeavor. On the demand side, of course, there's usually multiple stakeholders and they've all got competing priorities, and they're all number one priority, right? Because it's my number one priority. And everything becomes critical and everything is urgent. And in this world, it's difficult. It's difficult to make good decisions. And to make matters worse, if we say, well, let's prioritize on value, right? The problem with value is predicting value is really hard. We don't have a crystal ball. Imagine, I say if we have this new feature, it's going to earn us €1 million a month. But how do I know that? It's difficult to know that. We don't have a crystal ball, and there are many things changing at once. So even if we deliver that feature and we get the €1 million a month, how do we know it wasn't a different feature that caused that to happen? So it's kind of tricky. Also, we've got constrained capacity. We can't do everything, and there are tons of options that we could be doing. And kind of most importantly as well, before we start something, a big piece of work, we know the least about it. When we finished it, we know the most about it. So we're trying to play in this space of the future, and it's very difficult. right? So we need to find ways of making this simpler, and some conversation hacks that in order to start getting towards the value, is how much would it be worth to us if we had it right now? What would it be worth? And perhaps what would it have been worth if we'd had it a month ago? We can start thinking now about value and what will it cost us if we don't have it until next month. So these are kind of conversation hacks to try and get towards the value conversation as opposed to it's urgent, right? There's another phenomenon that I see a lot in organizations, especially when there's a lot going on and everyone is busy. The idea is that cost of delay helps us to actually create a monetary value to the time that's spent waiting, right? So in this example, these are weeks going along here, and the green and yellow are actually bits of work happening. Right, so we've got a simple process. We're capturing something. We're doing a proof of concept. Then we're doing development and testing, and then we go live, right? But if you notice, there's quite a lot of red there, and that is waiting time, right? So we captured it, and then it waited. And then we did the proof of concept. It took us a day or two within those 2 weeks, and then it waited again. And the point about this is what I normally find is by the time something arrives at let's do it, it's suddenly urgent, right? So that begs the question, was it not urgent when it was sitting waiting in the front end of the process there, which is essentially the front end is where we're examining all our options and deciding which of them to work on. So in this case, there was waiting of, I think if we add this up, it comes to about 38 weeks of just idle time for this particular work item. And what if we knew that the cost of delay is 100,000 euro per week? This means that we lost out on 3.8 million euro because of all this waiting time here. And why is that waiting time happening? Because probably, and it's usually the case, because we're working on other things, right? So this is a reality that I see in most organizations. So how do we put a price tag on time? And also, how does value perhaps change over time? Well, we need to look at value and we need to look at urgency. And these two things combined will give us the cost of delay. And we'll look a little later at how to actually calculate this. But and don't worry, the maths is if you can add and you can divide, then you can work out your cost of delay. It's not difficult. So the question then that I have is, how do we frame value? And I like to think about it like this. First off, why are we doing something, right? A request has come in. Why should we do this is the question. And these are the reasons. So when I think about value in an organization, I think about economic value. So is it going to increase our revenue if we have it? Will it protect existing revenue if we have it? Will it reduce costs, or will it avoid us taking on new costs if we have this thing? And if the answer is yes to one or more of those, then probably it's worthwhile going to the next step. And the next step is to say, well, we said it was going to increase the revenue by €1 million a month. What assumptions did we make when we came up with that number? And are any of those assumptions very dangerous in terms of, if we get it wrong, it's actually only €10 a month? Well, that's an assumption that we really want to validate, right? So if and usually what we would do here is create a small experiment that's short and quick and and proves or disproves our assumption, right? So this is all kind of cool, but the question is, if we can't estimate value, is it worthless? And that's an interesting question. And at the heart of it, I would say it probably is. It's probably not something we want to do. Even if all we're doing is we're creating a feature that we think is going to delight users, but it's not going to bring us any extra revenue or anything, then is that valuable? Yes, probably, because it's probably going to keep users with us because they're happy. So it's protecting revenue if we have that feature. So usually there is a correlation with an economic value, right? So yes, so now let's take a look at urgency. So assume that we have a way of calculating the value. For most standard items, work items, so for example, if we're going to automate our processes, if we start it now and we start automating, we're going to start receiving some benefits, assuming that we're delivering incrementally. We're going to start receiving benefits, and it's going to get to a point where we've got all the benefits that we needed, but we're going to continue receiving those benefits for the rest of time until the process is no longer valid, right? The process that we automated. Now, so this is a long-term peak and it's unaffected. And I'll show you why. So if we started, not now, but later, we started over here, right? Then effectively, this is the delay cost, this portion here. So we need to find a way of calculating what that cost is, right? So that's the opportunity loss of, it's the manual cost of labor of running the process manually, for example. But once even though we delayed it, we still automated the whole process. We just got it later, right? Another example is a late to market kind of example. Imagine we have a competitor and we've got to get this feature out, otherwise we're going to lose some of that market to our competitor. In this example, when we're late, the peak is affected because we lose some of the market. So the cost of delay extends for the rest of time. So this is probably a more expensive thing than the previous one. I know that in many organizations, everything is treated as it has to be done by this date. And in real terms, it's just not true. Some things are really date driven. So for example, a legislative compliance, something we've got to comply with by a certain date, or we start receiving penalties. So there's a cost benefit where we're going to avoid costs if we have this thing. And that's the date at which we need it. So up until that date, there's absolutely no cost, right? But a late entry is after that expiration date, and then we start receiving cost. Okay. And probably one of my favorites is, and the most severe kind of cost of delay is something like technical debt. Imagine we're writing a software product and we have no automated tests, right? So the more product that we write, the more we've got to manually test. Every week we've got to run all the manual tests, and that's starting to cost us more and more and more over time because of the number of people that we've got to employ to do that. So if we're late, if we don't start now, our cost of delay is all of this. And by the way, it shoots off the top of the screen because it becomes almost infinite if we get too late. And an example of this, actually the very first Scrum Agile project that I worked on, or product that I worked on back in 2005, the product was a rewrite of an existing product which had already reached this stage. They had no automated tests, and every time a developer wrote a line of code, a universe shut down behind somewhere in the product, right? So it just became impossible to add more to the product. That's something we want to avoid. But at any rate, it's an exponential cost of delay. So don't worry too much. I know this stuff can be a little bit confusing, but we're going to make it very practical in a moment. So so a question, maybe just a quick thing. If I share the Miro, if everyone's in there, maybe we can just jot down some thoughts on how does work get sequenced or prioritized in your organization. So I'm on this Miro board here. Hippos, highest paid person's opinion. Awesome. I see a lot of that. Story point. So what, if it's lower story points, we do it first, or something like this? Business value, right? And I'd love to know how the business value is calculated, or if it's also just a guess. Quick wins, or my least favorite phrase, low-hanging fruit. We do all the low-hanging fruit first and leave all the hard problems for later. Business value. Okay, so there are a number of techniques. We really don't know. Honesty, that I like that. And I've just listed a few that I see happen quite a lot. So the sooner we start, the sooner we finish, right? So start everything, just get it done. Maybe doesn't lead to good results, right? Or perhaps we've got multiple stakeholders that we're delivering for, and we do a round robin. I do a piece of yours, and then a piece of yours, and then a piece of yours, so that we kind of please all of the stakeholders equally. Or maybe it's budget-based. It's an equity decision. So we've got one stakeholder or customer that generates 80% of our revenue, so we do 80% of our time is spent on their stuff versus other people's stuff. Or my favorite is the Eurovision, the contest where the judges sit and they tell everyone who's the best, right? Or which idea goes through. Also, maybe not the best way of doing things. Or we do some kind of a cost-benefit ratio. And, the problem with that, I find, is that we've got to invest quite a lot of work or input into defining the cost-benefit ratio. So it can be a bit time-consuming. So maybe there are better ways to sequence. So here are some examples. And so there are 3 requests, and these 3 requests come in at the same time. And we've calculated a cost of delay for each one, how much it's costing us to not have this thing per week that we don't have it. So looking at this, and maybe you can just shout out. I think there's fewer, a small enough group that you can just unmute and say, but which one would you do first, just looking at this? Any thoughts? The last one.
Yeah, the last one. 1 million.
It seems kind of obvious, right? Request number 3 is costing us the most per week. So do that first, and then do request 1, and then do request 2, right? So cost of delay already on its own can give us quite a good indicator of where to start. That's pretty cool. However, there's another dimension that isn't incorporated here. What if it will take us forever to deliver request number 3? That's going to change things, I would imagine. So we need to introduce duration. So I've got this little thing called CD3 score. It's the cost of delay divided by duration. So we take the cost of delay, which is expressed as monetary value over time, right? And we divide it by the duration. Now, the duration I find in organizations is a tricky concept, because how long will it take, right, is essentially what we're asking. So there's this big project, how long will it take? So we need a way of determining that, and that's another whole talk, but there are many techniques like reference class estimation and so on. If we don't have data, or if we've got flow data, we can derive a duration from statistics. But there are quick ways of getting this information. I don't like to think about the duration here as how long will it take, because actually what we're trying to think about in cost of delay is how long is it going to block the pipeline so that we can't work on the other options while we're working on this one. So I think of the duration of how long is it blocking the pipeline. Okay, so if we take an example here, so I've got 3 projects, A, B, and C, and I'm going to just sequence them exactly in the same order that they arrived. So A, then B, then C. Okay. So if we look at the cost of delay numbers over here, we can see that, so A is not being delayed because we've started it, right? B is getting delayed by 5 weeks, right? And its cost of delay is 4,000 euro a week. So 5 times 4,000 is 20,000 euro cost of delay on B, and C is being delayed by B and A. So B and A is 6 weeks, and C's cost of delay is 5,000 euro a week. So 6 times 5,000 is 30,000. So 20,000 plus 30,000 cost of delay is 50,000 cost of delay if we are first in, first out sequencing. So if we want to change this to CD3 sequencing, essentially the higher so remember the CD3 number, it's a score. It's not a money number anymore. It's a score. So here we've taken the cost of delay, divided it by the duration of 5. So 1,000 divided by 5 equals 200. Now we've done that for each of the lines. So the higher the number, the sooner it starts. So it's B, then C, then A. Okay. So if we look at that, so B, then C, then A, look what happens to the cost of delay. It's quite a significant difference, right? So we've got, if we just organize these by the cost of delay number, we would have gone C, then B, then A, right? And that would have given us already a 27% reduction compared to, this gives us a 27% reduction compared to doing it that way, right? And an 84% reduction in delay cost based on what we did previously with FIFO, right? So the simple act of sequencing work differently can significantly reduce the cost of delay. And that's really, really important. So how on earth do we calculate these numbers? So I'm going to give you an example. Here's an example. So in this example, we're trying to take a request that is to improve the invoice accuracy. And if we're able to improve the invoice accuracy, it's going to reduce the number of late paying customers. And that's worth an additional 4 million euro per annum, per year. If we do this as well, it's going to reduce the number of calls we get on our call center. And that's currently costing us 5 additional call center agents that cost us 20,000 per agent. So that's 100,000 per year. So if we, so let's look at which value profiles they fit. So we're going to get an increase in revenue of 4 million per annum, and we're going to reduce our cost of 100,000 per year. So if we add those two together, we get 4.1 million per year. And to get it down to a week, we just divide by 52 weeks in a year, right? So 4.1 million divided by 52 gives us a number of around 80,000 euro per week. Hopefully this logic kind of makes sense. To see if this makes sense, we're going to try something. What I want to do is I want to take this example, well, a different example, a similar thing, and see how you're able to fill out a canvas and calculate not just the cost of delay, but the CD3 score as well. Don't fear, because there is some assistance on the canvas. The idea is, firstly, just to read through the example so that it makes sense to you. And then what we've done is created a bunch of information items that have come from this example, right? And what we want to do is move these items. So for example, if I think the urgency profile is this funny graph over here, then I'll just move the arrow there. Okay, and if I think that maybe eliminating the cost of manual deployment is part of the description, I'll move it there. So we want to kind of fill out this canvas. So we've got a description, we've got some assumptions that we've made clear, and then we've got the 4 value areas. So is it something that's increasing revenue, protecting revenue, decreasing costs? So we kind of want to move these things to where we think they belong on the canvas. And once we've got the numbers here, then there's a cheat over here. So it shows you, we want to add those numbers together, and then we want to divide by 52 weeks. And then that will give us what's the cost of delay per week. So we'll fill that in there. And once we have that, we'll take that cost of delay per week and we'll divide it by the 10 weeks that this item is going to block the pipeline for. And that will give us a CD3 number, a score, right? Have a conversation and try and work it.
So the request D is fully automated deployment of build files to, well, enables the delivery team to do 2 things. It enables them to eliminate business loss due to downtime during each closing window, which is estimated at 10K per closing window. In total, 8 closing windows per year, estimated benefit of 80 per annum. Cool. And then the second one is eliminate the cost of manual deployment, which is currently closing at 15K per annum. When we talk about the manual deployment, that can definitely decrease cost because we don't have to do that anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And then the second one is the closing window. So we're saying here that it's a benefit. Estimated, okay, so that's what we're losing, so we can actually protect that revenue. Yeah. So also maybe this one, because it's not the monetary value, it's eliminating business loss due to downtime. It can be part of the description, but then the 80K can actually be to protect the revenue. So the only thing why I would say this one isn't in the assumption is because we think. Thinking for me is a clear indication that it's an assumption. And then this arrow here, I think Mike already alluded to, there's a cheat sheet here. So that doesn't take too much. Matching the pictures, right? Does everyone agree that it goes here? This is the urgency profile. It's the long unaffected tail.
I'm not sure.
Or maybe the third one. If you lose business, they are
but I don't know if it would be
missed,
missed, right? So it's not necessarily because it's saving the organization, and it's a cost that we're avoiding. I don't know if it necessarily will be like a market opportunity, or that's why I wouldn't say the third one. The third one there is if we do, it's like a competitor that will have the same. And if we don't, then it will, we won't ever be able to gain that. So I'm seeing
I get the point. So the third one would be also applying more to increasing revenue if you have that on the canvas on the rate side.
Probably, yes. Yeah, it will link to some form of increased revenue. Okay, so are we ready to work out the cost of delay? So if we've got so the calculation, I'm just going to remind myself, it is we're adding these the numbers that we have per annum, and then we divide it by 52 weeks to get a weekly number. So that's going to be, please help me with my math here. So we're going to say 80 plus, what's the second one? 15. So it's going to, is that 95?
5,000, right? Divided by 52.
So now we've got so to get a CD3 calculation, we're going to use the week, the cost of delay per week, and we're going to divide it by the duration, which this item we're saying will take about 10 weeks. So it will clog up the line for 10 weeks. So we're going to take 1827 divided by 10. Great. So we've got a CD3 score
of 182.
Yeah.
183, whichever. Did that make some kind of sense? I guess in practice, this is something that we would want to do together, not someone sitting in their office calculating this for everyone, because the process of understanding what it is we're trying to achieve and what some of the assumptions are along the way is valuable conversation and valuable context for the people involved. Plus, not everyone knows everything, or not anyone knows everything. So it's useful to get a diverse view, so that what we come out with is something useful, right? And of course, if we did this for a number of different different requests, we would come out with a number of different CD3 values. And the one probably with the highest value would be the first thing that we'd want to do. Yeah, I guess the point is, what are we trying to do? We're trying to quickly understand the value of a request, along with the assumptions that led to that guess about the value, right? So that we can test those assumptions where they make a material difference. And the beauty of this approach is we can compare different types of requests. So we can compare the latest new big feature that's desired versus some boring, horrible technical debt. We can see which one is more valuable to actually work on next. So we can sequence requests to increase impact, and hopefully we can bring business people and teams together to actually build and compare the canvases together. So this is really, really useful. And the last point is, there is nothing about the future that is an exact science. So we're not trying to get precise. It's more about the conversations that we're having while we're doing the exercise, and then coming out to the scores and using it as a measuring tool that we can start sequencing work with. So yeah, that's it from me.
Well, thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.